Thank you so much for joining Dental Marketing Theory, a podcast by Gary Bird. In today's episode, our guest is Bill Neumann, leading industry expert and CEO of Group Dentistry Now. We discuss the current competition for talent, how DSOs struggle to differentiate themselves, and what associates want most. As always, please make sure to like, subscribe, share, and leave a comment, as all of those things really help our podcast and get the word out. Hope you enjoy today's show.
Hey, it's good to have you on today, Bill. Super excited to talk to you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, Gary. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, so I'm really excited. I'm a little bit nervous. Kind of when you watch people from a distance. I've been listening to your podcast, watching your website and all the content that you guys put out. And I love your guys' tagline, the voice of the DSO industry. So again, really excited to have you on and hear a little bit about your story and share that with the folks here. So I want to start with your dental journey. This is kind of the interesting thing that as we've been working through this podcast, what we've noticed is, especially for non-dentists, for people who end up in the dental industry, it usually wasn't on purpose, right? It wasn't something that they set out to do or set as a goal. So I would love to hear how you got into the dental industry and some of the industries that you climbed through to end up here.
Yeah. Thanks again for having me on. And you're right. Most of us, unless we are destined for dental school or have a family member, we just kind of come in here accidentally. And I'm no different. So I my financial management degree from Clemson, and came from a family of accountants and interned for an accounting firm one summer and realized I didn't want to do that for the rest of my life. So I already had the financial management degree, didn't want to go back to school. So when all else fails, you get into sales. And so ended up working for a fertilizer and flower bulb company. Don't ask me how that happened. It just was, just got into it because it was one of the few opportunities when I graduated college, and managed an 18-state territory, then worked for a division of Ford, Hertz Rent-A-Car, in their corporate sales division, so handled large accounts for them for quite a while. Got some really honed my professional selling skills, so B2B. I wouldn't say it was a glamorous job, but I really, kind of honed the skills that I didn't learn when I was selling flower bulbs and fertilizer. And then moved from the Hertz job. In looking back then, it was early 2000s. All things were pointing to pharmaceutical sales. So tried to get into the pharmaceutical business. After 8 or 9 interviews at each pharmaceutical company, could never get the job. I could get to that last interview, and somebody always beat me out. And somehow found myself with an interview with a medical/dental job, and I kind of looked at that and said, okay, medical sounds good. Didn't really know anything about dental. And so that's really kind of how I got into the dental industry, initially looking for a pharmaceutical job that turned into dental. And the company that I interviewed with, Coltine, big restorative company, do some endodontic products as well. They said, once you get into the dental industry, you'll never leave. And I was kind of like, well, is that a good thing or a bad thing? And so that's kind of how I ended up here.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's what I've been told too. And I've seen it true. I have a bunch of people, myself and several people on our team, that we're kind of here and we're stuck, but we love it. And I know you love it too. So that the dental manufacturer company that you started working for, how did that transition into Group Dentistry Now?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, so I've always had an entrepreneurial bug. And while I was at Coltine in around 2008, I saw a need to create a platform that connected dental manufacturers with distribution reps. So the Henry Scheins, Pattersons, Benkos, and the NDC dealers of the world. And there was always kind of this disconnect between the manufacturers and the distributors. So at the time, if you think way back, which isn't that long ago, Facebook was really just for college kids still. LinkedIn didn't have groups. Facebook didn't have groups either. So there was a platform called oh gosh, I'm even blanking out on the name now, but there's a cookie cutter platform that you could buy for about $60 a month, and you could kind of brand it however you wanted to. So I called it dentalsalespro.com and had a bunch of email addresses from working a bunch of trade shows. So just started to invite people to it. It got a little wind behind it. And all of a sudden we had, in about a year, we had about 1,000 people that were members of this Dental Sales Pro group. Wow. And we shared pictures and we had conversations, and a medical publisher found out about it, and they had one dental magazine called First Impressions. It doesn't exist now. And they thought, boy, this guy really knows what he's doing, which I didn't. But I also had the digital platform, which they didn't. It was a print publication. So they asked me to come in and run their dental publishing business. And so that's how I got into publishing anyway.
Yeah, that's great. And then, so you guys that's cool. I didn't know that. So you basically built your own social media little group there before social media was big. And then I know that's been a big part of your guys' success now and how you kind of get the word out, but it's through more on the LinkedIn side. Can you tell me a little bit about that and how Kim plays into that?
Yeah. Yep. So just to take one step back, when we so after the Dental Sales Pro and selling to the medical publisher, a lot of the advertisers, the vendors, industry partners, whatever you want to call them, that were working with us started to talk about these group practices. They weren't DSOs then, and that was around 2010. And they said, we can't reach them, right? We're too small. We don't have the sales team's structure set up yet. So we thought, why don't we create a magazine for DSOs, or group practices? Again, weren't DSOs. And so it started with the medical publisher, a print publication that's still in existence today. I left there in 2014 to start Group Dentistry Now with Kim. And, it really, LinkedIn was the way, and still is to a large degree, the way we reach our audience. And Kim is definitely, and she has the marketing PR background, I think around 27,000 connections on LinkedIn. I think once you get to 30,000, you pretty much max out. So she's almost maxed out. I'm, to a much lesser degree, have solid connections, but not like she does. So really kind of leveraged cadence. And so how often are we going to deliver content? The creating, and Gary, this, the creation of content is not easy.
Yes.
It looks like it is, but it's not. And then also to continually to do it in a way that people look forward to it. So you have to have the cadence
where they want to consume it, right? They have to want to consume it. If there's no consumption, then it doesn't matter.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly right. So we've leveraged LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook to a lesser degree.
So, and I know Kim is the expert, but outside of just having a massive following, is there any other little tidbits that you would give to somebody out there that says, hey, I want to try to break into LinkedIn?
Yeah, that's a great question. So neither one of us had a massive following before we started the content creation. So I think it's something that you have to really understand, that whatever it is, whether it's, it doesn't have to be content creation if you're not a publisher, but I think even the consistency is number one. And you're going to do it and nobody's going to see it for a long time. And then all of a sudden, the algorithms will find you and I think it's just really kind of finding out what you're good at, what your niche is in the industry. And there are a lot of niches, and just be consistent about it. So what's that messaging out there that you can provide that maybe nobody else is providing, and then do it on a consistent basis and just be genuine. I think that's probably the one thing that I try to be, is I can't be anybody else but myself, and hopefully more people like that than don't.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's definitely working for you guys. And I know one of the things that you do, or the niche that you've carved out for yourself, is you take an industry partner's perspective. And you've kind of, I know when you started, there wasn't a lot of information out there about DSOs or groups, right? And now the tables have turned. And so can you give me a little bit of insight into your mindset of how things were when you started and how they are now?
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, if you look back again, it wasn't too long ago in 2014, 2015 timeframe, trying to find content out there, even on the wire, right? And deal with DSOs or groups, there was not much. There was a lot of negative information out there, and not necessarily on the wire, but through Facebook and social media. And what we wanted to do really is, we wanted to be, so I have to say this right. We wanted to be like Switzerland. So we're pro DSO, pro group practice, which kind of wasn't even a thing back then. Yeah. But we didn't want to necessarily say this model's better than this. We just wanted to say, hey, this makes sense for the industry. It might not make sense for you, but you need to be aware of it, and it makes sense for a lot of people, and deliver the content that way. We were Kim and I kind of we would strategize every week and go, what are we going to write about this week? There's nothing out there to talk about. We normally kind of look at what other people might be doing, or you know, what Aspen might have put out, or Heartland might have put out at the time.
Responding to the news, right? We see that on the news all the time, where someone releases news, and then there's news on that news and news on that news. But when there's no news, then yeah.
So so what we tried to do is kind of back to your point. We said, okay, well, we know the manufacturers really well, the industry partners. Let's get some perspective from them, what they're seeing, because a lot of them had 30,000 foot view. They were working with all the different groups, and they could kind of tell you what's going on. Brian Kaleo over at Dykema was somebody that worked with us early on, had great perspective, being there on the M&A side of things, and setting up legal structures, and can give us perspective. And it's just funny, again, going back to the origins of the platform. We had somebody from Gary Picard he's from Pacific Dental. He's been there forever, and he was seeing what we were doing, and he's like, we need to have a meeting. I'm not sure what you guys are up to. Again, there was a lot of, I think, suspicion back then of, okay, somebody's out there talking about DSOs, and normally it's negative. And I wanted to reassure them that, hey, no, we believe in the model. So just really funny how things have changed.
Yeah, and people used to lay low, and so now it's not that way anymore, right? Now people are talking about how great our culture is, or how great our atmosphere inside our DSO is, and so tell me a little bit about what you're seeing now in the landscape of information out there, and how you've adapted to it.
Yeah, you better not be laying low at this point, right, Gary? I think there's still some people that might, for whatever reason, and again, it takes work, and even if you're a big DSO. You may be really good at marketing, and when we say marketing, getting patients to your practices, or
B2C.
Maybe even patient retention. But can you market beyond the patient, right? So how do you create a marketing campaign really based around recruitment for docs, non-clinician, right? Whatever, and then also for potential acquisition. So like, why? If I have 2 or 3 locations, or a single location, why would I want to partner with XYZ DSO when, I hear about all these great things from the ones that really do a good job of marketing out there. So you do see a lot more activity, but I still think the industry has quite a bit of a ways to go. I see some even like DSO websites, at the support side of things. If I'm a dentist, I'm looking to sell, or I'm looking for a career opportunity, I'm not going to the Grand Rapids location website, right? I want to go to the support website, and can I even find it? What's the messaging there?
Yeah, I love this topic. So this is like my love language, and this is really where our focus at SMC has been for really right after the COVID, because so many people needed it. There's first of all, marketing to patients is B to C, right? And that's a very particular kind of marketing. And there's really honestly an abundance of patients. If you learn what roadblocks to remove, there's plenty of patients for all the dentists out there. Where it gets sticky, and to your point, is when you're marketing more B2B, and that is the employer brand, and that's the acquisition model to get your name out there and really market who you are at the DSO level. And that's something that I think, you're 100% right. There's just not a lot of activity there, and which is awesome, because if you're a first mover in that space, you can really take advantage of it. And I've seen several people jump into those waters and do it properly, and really level up their employer brand, which means they're getting all the top talent, or first pick at the top talent, and then also level up their acquisition, which means they're getting first pick of people wanting to sell their practices. So it's kind of the situation of where the rich get richer in that situation, but you can move into this space and compete with the big dogs, because the internet allows you to now in this space. Just like you guys jumped in and started building a LinkedIn presence, there wasn't a lot of resistance there, because you guys were in a space that was not a lot of people were providing content. So I love that. So where do you see the industry heading when it comes to those things? What's your crystal ball tell you?
Well, I think there's some people out, so you're going to have to get pretty creative. Number one, if you're a DSO, as the market gets a little bit more crowded, and it is, and that's opportunity. It's great for docs looking to sell. It's great for career seekers for sure. But there's definitely a challenge there, and I'll just give a couple for instances. Like I love I'll call out a couple groups. I won't say the ones that are doing it wrong. I'll say the ones that are doing it right. I love MB2. I mean, they created that DPO, right? They did deliveries like, what's a DPO, right? Oh, wow, that sounds better than a DSO. So there's some, they've really created, this new term that didn't exist. And it is a little bit different. But, my point is it's like, that's theirs. And they created that. Some others have kind of, glommed onto it a little bit. But you have to try and figure out, how you differentiate yourselves. And, I think everybody does. They may not know how to articulate that. And then from there, you've got to articulate it and then figure out a way to market it correctly. But I really love what they've done. I think some of the websites that I've seen that have done really well, are the ones, the DSOs that are creating stories. So on the recruiting side, it's hygiene. Let's talk about a hygienist and why they've come over to Heartland, for example, and what's the career look like, and what do the career opportunities look like? Because obviously it's tough to find people nowadays. So beyond just the job or the money, what else is there? And you mentioned it earlier, Gary. You talked a little bit about culture. It's something that's kind of kicked around quite a bit now. I don't know if everybody even knows what it means. Like, oh, we've got, everybody has culture. It may not be good culture, but you have culture.
Yeah.
Do you even know what your culture is? As we did our DSO Leadership Summit a couple weeks back, about 3 weeks now, and every single segment we did, regardless of what it was about, it could have been M&A, and culture comes up. Like, there's that word again. So I think you have to kind of figure out what that is, and then again, back to articulation. What's that culture, and why is that a reason somebody might want to come work for you or sell their practice and become part of your group?
Yeah, and it's articulating it, to your point. It's not enough just to say we have culture. It's articulating, what is your culture? What does it mean? And then how do you tangibly deliver that to people? Some of the things that we've seen work really well on this front is taking each position in your company that you're trying to recruit for, and then building out an avatar around it, right? So you say, okay, well, you need more hygienists. Who's the perfect hygienist? Well, it's Susan here. She's our lead hygienist, and she's amazing. She embodies all of our core values, and we think she's just great. And here's why. Boom, 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 boom. And then you take Susan and you make a video around Susan, and you have Susan talk about why it's so awesome there. And guess what? Susan's perspective of being a hygienist at your company is going to be a little bit different than your perspective as the marketing director or someone in the executive suite. And she's going to be able to articulate to the hygienist why they should come there. And then if you do that for each position, right? So every position that you're struggling with recruiting, then you build a culture video. And the culture video is all those positions working together to talk about how awesome it is to work there. And then you can use that for retargeting to people who aren't even looking for jobs right now, but maybe in the future. So all of a sudden, you've just opened up your pond of opportunity. And I know another way that just made me think of it. I know you guys have some opportunities to help people get more team members in the door. Can you tell me a little bit about JoinDSO and how that works and how that came about?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I love your point, Gary. Before I talk about JoinDSO, kind of creating those, if you want to call them a testimonial or a built-in case study, and it's certainly a lot more relatable to hear about somebody that's in the position, what it's like to work at XYZ company. Like, I know that that's the job I'm going to be doing. I seem like I'm like this person, or I want to be like this person, or this person's great. They'd be a great peer, versus hearing from the CEO or the chief marketing officer or the HR director, like, okay, all right, well, you've never done the job. Doesn't apply to me. So that's just a really great point about marketing, and really having the people that are doing the job actually communicate to the people that might not even be looking for the job, but might go, oh, maybe I want to go work there. That sounds great. Yep.
Yep.
Yeah.
And
So
the
on the
cool
Join
part,
Yep.
real quickly on that. So the cool part about that, about the dental industry, and it's not true for every industry, all the dental hygienists label themselves online, right? They're all on LinkedIn as dental hygienists. So you can literally take those avatar videos and those culture videos and then just hit them. So that's a little tip for everybody there. So yeah, but tell me about JoinDSO. How did that come about? And then how does that help people with the current crisis that we see in the labor shortage?
Yeah, so it's interesting how that all came about when we again started Group Dentistry Now. JoinDSO was really an offshoot and a need that we heard from the people that we were writing about, right? The DSOs. So as we started to create content, what we heard was, well, we do a lot of recruiting, or we're looking for practices to acquire. There's really a couple different parts to JoinDSO. We thought, well, obviously a job board just makes sense, right? I mean, we're not the first people to do a job board, nor the last. But what we did was we created a sister website, JoinDSO, which is tied into Group Dentistry Now. And the way it works is it's really three parts. So if I come to the website, JoinDSO, and I'm just interested in learning more about groups, DSOs, I can just go to the education tab and just click on that. And really what that is, it's content that we generate on Group Dentistry Now. If I'm looking to sell my practice, I kind of go down that path. And then by state, I can find the DSOs in a particular state that are looking to acquire practices. And then I can go into Alabama, for example, and I can find all the DSOs there. And I can kind of explore what the models look like. On the other side, the career side, which is what we were talking about earlier, if I happen to be looking for a career, I can go and look at the DSO. So before I even look to see if there's a career there, because quite frankly, it's probably an opportunity at every DSO in the country right now. Might not have always been the case, but I can go and look at the model a little bit and go, hey, okay, I like this. And then we attach content to that. So we can do exactly what you're talking about. We can hear from the hygienist or the dentist, and whether if it's on the acquisition side, we can actually hear about somebody that sold their practice to Core Dental and what that experience was like and why they chose them over all the other options. So I think without the content piece, regardless of whether you use JoinDSO or they're working with you, Gary, and your team, it's like you've got to have the content. You really have to be able to be a storyteller somehow. And then on top of that, it's being consistent, right? You can't just do one story. We see this all the time, right? Yeah. You see people start and they'll do 2 or 3 articles or a podcast or 2, and then it just stops.
Yep.
So it's consistency, it's storytelling, and just it does work. It takes a little bit of time, but it will work.
Absolutely. I love that. So I'm going to change gears on you just a little bit. What do you see group practices doing really well right now? Like where's the group dentistry space winning?
Well, so I think it's becoming more sophisticated. I think what you're seeing less of these roll-ups where you've got somebody out there that's got money that's just duct taping a bunch of practices together and then selling them. Where there's no culture, right? You've got one doing one thing, the other 5 or 6 doing whatever they are. There's no gel, right? So it's really.
So you're seeing less of those.
I am seeing less of those. I think Heidi Arndt has put it well, where she's like, you're either a group practice or a group of practices. And I think we're seeing more group practices and less a group of practices. So what you see is, because you see more DSOs, groups, whatever you want to call them, that are tied together, they have culture, there's more value created, right? I mean, if you think about it, they're using the same systems, their values are the same, they're aligned, which, again, aligned is another word that I think we hear a lot of aligned in culture. Again, words you can throw around easily, but if you have those two, in essence, you're creating more value for the DSO, for the group.
Mm-hmm. That's great. And then, so where would you say that we're struggling right now in the group dental space, where that we have room for improvement?
Well, I mean, I still think there's a need out there to be able to tell your story the right way. I think there are a lot of groups out there that exist and are struggling. I think so. There's a big struggle now finding practices to acquire for certain groups, and part of that is they're out there, valuations are higher, so there's the struggle there. But I do think that there's still a lot that just don't know how to tell their story. I'll give it, for instance, I won't say who it was. A dentist that has 30 locations, 30 plus locations, obviously successful, right? It's doing $35-40 million in production. But when I talked to them a little bit about creating some content and how are you different? Why are you different than some other groups? I got an email back where we're not really different. And I'm like, well, first off, you've got to be different. You can't be that successful, but you've got to figure out, but for a CEO of somebody that, a group that has 30 locations to say, we're not really that different. You better figure out how you're different. So it's easier, asked than said. So I just thought that was pretty interesting. And I think there's probably a struggle out there to differentiate. And then competition for talent's a huge issue.
Huge, yeah. Yeah, because
I would say also competition for those practices.
Absolutely, yeah, because we're not just competing for in dental anymore. Pre-COVID, it was just dentist versus dentist. So if the bar was kind of low, it wasn't a big deal if no one had an employer brand or if you didn't have good reviews on Glassdoor because the playing field was kind of level. Now you're competing with tech companies, you're competing with marketing companies, you're competing with everybody for that same pool of talent, and it's a lot. The stakes are a lot higher. Because of that. So yeah, I definitely agree with you on that. And then also going back to your point, I love your thought process around like the 30 practice level, and kind of what I've seen in that space is that pre-COVID, a lot of people didn't really have marketing figured out, but it wasn't a big deal because they were trying to figure out tech and they were trying to figure out several, HR and several other things, right? And getting that all organized. And then COVID hit. And then patient referrals dried up and drive-bys dried up. And it was like, we got to figure out this marketing part because we need to be able to generate leads consistently and predictably. And so we saw a huge boom of people starting to build their marketing teams. And what happened because of this labor crunch that we're seeing now is everybody's running back to HR and saying, okay, now we got to go build this up because now we need a recruiting team rather than just being able to post a job on Indeed. We need a recruiting team, and that's sucking away resources from marketing. So a lot of people who were like gung-ho on building that marketing department are now kind of pulling back a little bit on that, focusing more on the HR, outsourcing some of the marketing. Again, I've seen that like kind of ebb and flow. Have you seen the same thing, or have you seen something a little bit different from your perspective?
No, I would agree with you. I mean, I think you definitely see this flux in the industry, and kind of getting back to your early point about that. Yeah, the non-clinician, if you've got people that are office managers that maybe a little, somebody doesn't have a clinical job, there are a lot of opportunities out there, even outside the industry. So you really have to paint a picture, I think. And some of it does come back to safety in COVID. I mean, there's an issue with a certain percentage of the population that are like, listen, I really don't want to have to worry about this. And oh my gosh, guess what? I can work remotely. And those are things
you also have kids that come into play that I've noticed, because a lot of the dental industry is female and they have kids, and a lot of them stayed home with their kids because of COVID. And then when we saw that transition come back to the industry, they opted for a stay at home. Same thing as what you're seeing on the COVID side. But when you combine those two things together, that's a massive pull in the wrong direction for dental.
Yeah. And I think obviously, there are many things that you have to do in the office, in the dental office. I think on the support side, there are functions that can be, you could go into the office once a week or twice a week on the support side, the non-clinical, but yeah, the office, you pretty much need to be there. So,
yep. Yeah. I love it. Changing gears on you a little bit, tell me a little bit about the marketing arm of Group Dentistry Now. How does that work? How does someone plug into that, and what's some of the benefits that come along with that?
Yeah, so I think it's kind of a two-part, right? So there's the industry partner side of it, and then there's the DSO side of it and the marketing there. And again, I'm a big fan of, you want to call it storytelling, content creation. It's super important. So stick with the DSOs, since we've been talking about the DSOs first. I would say on the DSO side of things, it's a lot of what you're already talking about, Gary. So it's really creating stories. So we do a couple different things. We'll work with groups to create stories for the recruitment side. So we talk about the individuals, and we can target, hygiene. We can talk about clinicians that are working there, and then again talk about career path, because there are a lot of docs that may get involved that may not want to be in the chair for the next 20 years of their lives. They may want to look for some upward mobility. And so, you kind of think about that and you're like, no, we just want somebody to do the clinical work. But you need to create other opportunities for them. And maybe it is clinical, but they're mentors. And, maybe they're mentoring, 5 locations or 10 locations, or maybe there's a clinical director opportunity where they can evaluate products. So there's a lot of things even on the clinical side, and same thing for hygienists as well and dental assistants. There's the education piece. You've got a DSO, you have multiple locations, you have turnover, so you have to continually educate. So we create stories kind of related to that for the DSOs, and then we talked a little bit about it on the affiliation
just pausing
side.
really quick. If I'm a DSO and I come to you and say, hey, I want some help around this, you'll help them craft those stories. Is that right?
Well, yeah, so we can, or we work with other partners that will craft the story for them. Some are big enough where they can actually do that in-house. Yeah. And then the other thing, kind of more at the top level, at the top co, just really creating some branding for the DSO itself. We work with a lot of DSOs. We have an emerging groups to watch, which is kind of a pretty big deal now. We actually, for the first time, we were so happy to be able to do it, finally hand out awards. So we have a list every year, and we have an editorial board. So the editorial board kind of looks at all the applicants. Editorial board's a mix of DSOs and people that are industry partners, and kind of vote on the top 10 of the year, and then just really do a blowout article and talk about the culture there and how many locations and the struggles really and the aspirations. So that's become kind of a thing, which is great. So that's at the top level. And then we also look at the people, and we have DSO influencers that we highlight. So that's really the marketing side of it. And on the industry partner side, I'll touch on it briefly. But really what we want to do is anything that we create for industry partners has to be relevant to DSOs. I mean, there's a lot of content out there. I would say the majority of the content that industry partners create seems to be it's heavily tech focused or heavily clinical. And we're like, well, DSOs are a little bit different. Depends on who's listening to it. Not that clinical is not important, but let's talk to the audience. And that's probably one of the biggest challenges I've found, is trying to get the marketing teams at some of these big dental companies and say, we've got to change this. It doesn't have to be completely reworked, but you have to tweak it a little bit to message the audience the right way. So we work with industry partners all the time on how to do that. And that's a lot of fun. A little frustrating depending on who you're working with, but for the most part, you can kind of just tweak it a little bit to resonate with the DSOs, and the DSOs appreciate that because they're being talked to by an industry partner that knows the way they operate. So I think that's super important.
That's so good. You're bringing so much value to the space, and really where we're at. And this goes back to what we originally started talking about. Is I remember when, about 10 years ago, 15, maybe 12 years ago, it was kind of like having a website and spending a lot of money on that website as a dentist was kind of like, why should I do that? And there was only a couple people doing it, right? And they killed it. They did great with it. But most people were like, no, I don't want to spend money on that. I don't want to spend money on Google reviews. And kind of there was a lot of resistance to that. But now it's just common knowledge that this is the bare minimum that you need to do to even be in the conversation to be a dentist in the day and age that we live. And I see the same thing happening now as we move through the employer brand and the HR versus marketing. How are we going to get this information out there? And there's a little bit of a resistance. I don't think because people don't want it's not like people don't want to do it. It's just, how do we do it, right? Yeah. What's the right way to do it? So huge opportunity there. If you haven't figured out that you shouldn't be doing just B2C, but you need to be doing B2B as well, I think you guys are a great option to be able to help them with that. So that's awesome. And then I know something else that you guys do is you have some like a consulting arm where you kind of help organizations. Can you tell me a little bit about that and how that works?
Yeah, I mean, given my background working for a dental manufacturer for 7 years and being on the sales side, a national sales trainer for them, and then a manager, again, I kind of come at things from that industry partner perspective. So there still are, believe it or not, a lot of dental manufacturers, companies that are providers, industry partners that don't really have a solid sales and marketing plan when it comes to groups. The industry's changing, right? It's going from this cottage industry solo, where it was very clinically, everything was clinically focused. You could go up and you could show your widget and talk about the clinical value, and the doctor who owned the practice was making the decision. And so shorter sales cycle, much easier. Totally changed. So I do a lot of consulting work with dental manufacturers and industry partners to really kind of hone those marketing and sales strategies, and which is a lot of fun. So I do that personally, and then Kim comes in and can work with them on the marketing side of things. So that's one thing. I sit on the board of a couple different organizations, and I'm actually fortunate enough to be on the board of a startup DSO. So now I'm kind of on the inside, which I've always wanted to be, just to really learn about. And I'll tell you, Gary, it's being on the inside now. Seems a lot easier on the outside. It's not. I mean, it's amazing to see somebody go from no locations to start to add a couple of locations. So it's really just interesting to see the dynamic there. And marketing's a big component of it. We're discussing that right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, it is a lot of work. I've gotten the opportunity to kind of see behind the curtain of a couple of DSOs and work as either fractional CMO or fractional digital lead. And it's hard, right? It's not as easy to move these big yachts as they get bigger. When you're one location, two locations, you're kind of like a speedboat, and you can just turn really quickly and be really nimble, make decisions really quickly. But yeah, the bigger you get, or the more strategies that are involved, the harder it gets. So I definitely know that you guys have the answers around that, and so that's exciting that you guys provide those resources for people and give people the opportunity to shortcut, right? Like get a little bit of a cheat code by working with you. So I love that mindset. What right now would you say is one of the biggest myths in the group space that people are dealing with?
One of the biggest myths. Well, I mean, we kind of touched on it a little bit earlier. It's certainly not as easy as it looks, right? It's not like you just start a group and you make a bunch of money. So I think that would be one of the myths. And I don't think it's as much a myth now as it once was. And I know we touched on this earlier. It used to be that, the myth was that a DSO just was kind of drill and fill, right? It was subpar dentistry. The dentist didn't necessarily, like working there. And I think those myths to a large degree have been, really, you don't hear them much anymore. And I think where you had issues in the past, that's been pretty much straightened out. And we talked about the duct tape practices a while back. I think the sophistication level of the industry, the realization that you have to provide quality patient care, it's a given, has to be done, or you're not going to survive as a DSO. Doesn't matter what your revenue is. You really need to provide great patient care. And now I think on top of that too, it's not just about the patient care. It's really about the customer experience. You kind of look at it, in the old days, dentists would go, well, if I give you the best patient care, then that's the same thing as the best customer experience, which totally isn't the case.
No.
So yeah. I think you kind of see the industry maturing.
Because the dentist sees things wrong with the teeth that the patient don't necessarily see as wrong, right? So a patient can walk out and have a super happy smile, and look at it and go, this is great. And then a dentist can look at it and say, no, they're off by this and this is off by here. But the patient experience still might have been awesome. So there's definitely a disconnect there. But I agree with you. There's definitely, that's changing. That mindset is changing. And you have the clinical side and then you have the patient journey side. And there really are two separate things. Yep. Totally agree with you.
And I think the DSOs for the ones that I talk to, clinical is super, super important to them. And the other thing that I say, whether it's a struggle that you see, or, I mean, you've got to make sure that you're continually training and mentoring, the docs and the non-clinicians that you have, because again, we go back to one of the biggest issue, which is recruitment, HR. And if you're not educating and constantly challenging, your team, which is what they want. I mean, they want that education. They want that mentorship. They're going to go elsewhere.
That's why they went into dentistry, right?
Right.
Yeah. So what do you think? So I've heard a couple of different perspectives on this. And maybe there's a hybrid in the middle, and I've seen kind of the industry shift. So I know mentorship is huge, right? So if you're a DSO or a group and you're trying to attract dentists, mentorship is big part of that, and they want to have that community and be able to learn and grow. But then there's also the opportunity for ownership. How does that work? How does that balance? And how do you kind of see that shifting and changing over the last couple of years?
Yeah. So, I mean, I do think the ownership piece is for some people, it matters. I think the work-life balance seems to be the most important thing out there. It's maybe a little bit different than it has been with generations past, but I think ownership's important. And what does that mean? I mean, that's the other thing. I think it means different things to different DSOs, and it means different things to different people, dentists, even non-clinicians. So do I need to have ownership at the top co, right? Do I need part of that DSO at the top? Even if it's a little piece, do I need that? Or do I just want ownership at the practice level? Or if I'm mentoring, right, and I'm mentoring like 5 or 6, do I get some ownership at that region that I take care of? Like I'm the dentist. I've been there 5 years. I'm going to mentor all the new dentists, clinicians that come in, or hygienists, or whatever it is. Maybe there's a stake there. So it's pretty creative. And I mean, you kind of talk to these different models that exist. There's so many options out there. I think, again, that's a great way to kind of differentiate yourself. I don't know if there's a secret sauce to it or what works best, but I think you can create something that works, for your group, and you can keep, your people happy, whether it's whatever that ownership looks like. And
I think that's the key there, is like creating an opportunity, right? So it's like, hey, we're recruiting you. You're a young grad, and we're recruiting you in. And yes, over here, there's an opportunity for ownership at some level, however you want to create that for your group. But not everybody's going to take you up on it, right? So, but having that opportunity there, and I've seen a lot of the bigger groups kind of shift and change towards that model, right? Where it's like, okay, we're going to create those opportunities, because obviously retention is important. So that's huge. Tell me a little bit about your dental Lifeline network that you guys have. I thought that was pretty interesting as I dug into what you guys do.
Yeah, so dental Lifeline networks existed, for quite a while, longer than I've been around. But it was a volunteer organization, and it's really to provide it's a way to recruit dentists. At least that's what we do at Dental Lifeline Network, and I'm on the board there, to recruit dentists to actually volunteer their time for the underserved. So the underserved can mean, people with disabilities, people that don't have access to dental care. We do a lot of work with veteran organizations. And, I kind of look at Dental Lifeline Network, and just like everybody in the industry, for the longest time, Dental Lifeline Network was focused on working with solo practitioners. Mm-hmm. But I do think there's a real place, and Pacific Dental does a lot of work with Dental Lifeline Network. They're our biggest DSO that works with us. But for the smaller groups out there, and again, we kind of go back to recruitment, right? Or why would I want to come work for your DSO? Or why would I want to sell to your DSO? What else are you doing, right? So it's beyond the ownership and beyond the mentorship and the education. It's like, how are you giving back to the community? And so Dental Lifeline Network could almost be your outsourced volunteer organization. So we'll get the patients that you need. We'll send them to your group, and then your folks can give back, and they can do whether it's once a day or we have a program called Will You See One. And really, it's all about just seeing one veteran. That's all you have to do per year. Just see one. And it was really impactful. And, we've radio commercials around the country and different ways to kind of market that. But I think for emerging groups, it's a nice kind of almost a plug and play volunteer organization that does great work, been around for 50 years, and just enjoy it. It's a way for me to give back, and love to, make more, especially emerging groups, aware of what we do.
That's awesome. Yeah, we're definitely going to promote that, and I want to get that out there. And I love that you guys are supporting that. So we're going to make that its whole own section there. So I love that you guys are doing that.
Thanks.
All right. Last couple questions for you. So most impactful marketing campaign in your life that like on you personally?
Gosh, that's a great question. So I've been thinking a little bit about this, and I don't know if I've got one. But
that's okay.
So the kind of the ones that stick with you are really, I think, the most impactful. So and I'm probably going to be dating myself on each one that I mention. But I always love the Nike one with Bo Knows. So Bo Jackson, I kind of go back to Bo and love Bo because he could, as a kid, to me, he could do everything.
He was a freak. Yeah, he was a freak. He was he was superhuman.
And he was a likable guy. Like I liked Bo as a person, and of course, I liked him that he could do everything. So Bo Knows. If kind of look at some other ones that I think of the Clydesdales and Budweiser. That's another one that I think of. And then one that I always got a chuckle out of because you always have to have one that's funny is the old Wendy's. Where's the beef?
Yeah. Yep. I remember that one. It's funny when people bring these up. I'm like, you don't think of them, and then all of a sudden they come into your mind, and you can instantly like remember where you're sitting and what was going on. I actually had Bo's cross trainers, and those were. I remember how cool those were.
So Bo Knows would be the first for me.
Yeah, that's a good one. Okay, so how can people find you? I want to make sure that people get plugged in. If you're listening to this and you're not plugged in to what you guys are doing, they're missing out. So what's an easy way that people can just get plugged right into what you're doing?
Yeah, so a bunch of different ways. So you can go to groupdentistrynow.com and you'll find us there. There's you can subscribe. To find out what we're doing, the best thing to do is subscribe to our newsletter. It's free. We do not spam at all. So we deliver, the content that we deliver on our website to your inbox. And so that's what I would recommend. Sign up for our e-newsletter. Again, free, no spam. And it keeps you in touch with what's going on with the industry. I'm on LinkedIn all the time. So you can just, look me up on LinkedIn, Bill Neumann. I think it's Dental Sales Pro is actually what it's under, but you can find me pretty easily.
That's awesome. So we're going to include, if you're listening right now, just right below the video here or the audio, you'll see the link to subscribe. And we'll also make sure to include the LinkedIn links for you and for Kim, so that way they can connect with you and stay up to date with everything you're doing. Great job today. Thank you so much for everything you shared. And I'm really excited to get this up and out to everybody.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. I really respect what you and your team are doing, and look forward to what you have in store for the future. And it sounds like we're doing some similar things, so I'd love to figure out afterwards how we can collaborate more.
Let's do it. All right. Thanks so much.
Thank you.